I'm Kayla Amanda. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. Have I been gone for roughly a million years? Yes, I have. Do I feel bad about that? A little bit, but nothing exciting or dramatic happened in that time, except I did finish a manuscript. Kind of buried the lead on that one. I finished a manuscript of a tentacle porn, venom adjacent erotica novel, which after working on it, it's quite clear that it is a midpoint novel in a longer series, and I'm trying to figure out what the beginning of that series looks like, which is what we're doing in this video. So the thing is that I wrote book 3 of a series, which I know it's ridiculous. Why are you working on book 3 when you haven't written book 1? But the fact of the matter is, I thought that it was book 1, and then I realized as I was writing it that it was not, for several reasons. All of the badass self-publishing ladies that I follow and whose advice I really really respect, they always say that, you know, the back catalog is king, that series are where you get readership to make a little bit of money. And while I have no need or immediate plan to become a full-time author and give up my job with pension and benefits, as I think I said before, I would like to not need a roommate if I don't want one. And part of making that happen appears to be making series happen. Plus, I have the too much gene and I always think in series even when I really shouldn't be, which means that I'm in a situation where I have written the 3rd book of a series and plotted the series, but I have a significant problem. My problem is that I am having the hardest time writing book 1, or plotting book 1, which is what I am trying to do today, get this plot written. So I know that the book that I wrote is book 3, partially because it kind of starts with this expectation that you understand the world a little bit. It is a fish out of water trope, which I think is really important for an entryway, but it also kind of leans on other character relationships that I don't want to expect my audience to necessarily know from the jump. And I think this is the most important part when it comes to why I will not be using it as my first novel. It's a tentacle porn book, which is great. I love a good monster fucker book. No shame there. But there isn't really gonna be more tentacle books. It's kind of a one-off in the series. And I think that if I start with a tentacle monster book, I'll get the monster fucker fans, who will then be disappointed when there is no other unusual anatomy, and I will not get more traditional paranormal fans who might be put off by a tentacle book. And I think if I can get a more standard paranormal fan involved in books 1 and 2, which have more traditional anatomy, I think that keeping them for one book of tentacle fucking won't be that difficult. And I think that monster fuckers read other paranormals, so I think that I have the best audience retention if it's not my first book. But that means I still have to write my first book. So I know that I want a fish out of water. That is to say, someone who does not know about the magic world. In the world that I'm working with, there is magic, but it's a standard modern world that operates with a masquerade. Normal people don't know about magic, don't know about the arcana, is what I'm calling it. So, I know that my first book is going to be about someone who is first being introduced to the arcana, didn't know anything about it, this is their first introduction. So I know that the books in general are about the friends and allies of this woman named Valentine, who is my Raphael from Guild Hunters, my Curran from the Kate Daniels books, my Ethan Sullivan, the powerful, somewhat aloof, supernatural figurehead of a group. And in my world, that is Valentine. And I know that the first book is about Valentine's brother, who is her second in command, and a fish out of water character type. Which is great. That's, you know, a lot to know, I guess, for a starting off point. But because I already have the rest of the series plotted out pretty precisely, I have some other constraints that I need to worry about. For example, I know that Valentine's second in command, or I guess right hand and left hand, used to be Valerian, her brother, and Hartigan. But Hartigan betrayed her and went off to do his own thing, and they're not totally sure why. But he has two kids, one of whom is named Eilish and one of whom is named Howell. Now, Eilish is going to be a big deal character, and I know that by the end of the first book, Hartigan has to be dead, and Eilish has to be the one who did it. She also has to be in trouble about it so that she can be put in quasi-protective custody, quasi don't go evil tutoring with another character. Basically, what I have to do with this first book is have a way in which a fish out of water character who knows nothing about the supernatural world interacts with Valerian, who is Valentine's second, about Hartigan's betrayal, ending up with him dead and his daughter who killed him in custody. Which are like, in some ways it's good to have constraints so I know like what direction I need to go in, and in other ways it's very frustrating to have constraints.
What is this? That's not, how is that letters? What? I don't know what I did there, but it's bad. So I got actually quite a lot done at Starbucks, which was great because it needed to get done. I also got flowers and some time. But so I planned to write my first book. I like vaguely knew that it was going to be about Bee and Valerian, and Hartigan was going to die at the end of it. Well, it turns out that I was like trying to force myself into something that wasn't really going to work for me. So that's book 2. Book 1 is about a completely new couple that I did not plan on, but it actually sets up the whole like Hartigan Eilish situation a lot better. And we'll have Hartigan die at the end of that book. And then Valerian and Bee, I have kind of figured out the main strokes for, which is nice. But it does mean a whole other book in the series. So, fuck my life, I guess.
So at first I had this list that said like, what does Bee's book need to do? 1, it needs to introduce the world. 2, it needs to set up Eilish to be in custody. And 3, it needs to give Kiva and Gray a reason to play politics in the next book. Okay, that's great. But I didn't know how to make Bee's book work with that. Like, I didn't know how to make her and Valerian fit that with the dynamics that I wanted them to have. I wanted them to have like a forced proximity, trapped together in a remote location vibe, and it wasn't, the math wasn't mathing. The first book is going to be all about Hartigan and getting away from Hartigan, and I think that that's part of the problem, that Hartigan didn't make sense as the villain for Bee's book. Didn't make sense as the villain for Bee's book because he doesn't really have anything to do with her or Valerian, except that him and Valerian used to be friends. But their story doesn't really center Eilish, it doesn't really center Hartigan, so it didn't make sense. With this series, one of the things that I'm really working on is not worrying so much about like what other people will think of it, how other people react to it. It's just like writing the dumb tropes that I like to write and I like to read and going with it. If you've been watching my channel for like any length of time, you will know that that's kind of something that I'm working on in general, is not having so much expectation on myself and just like writing the things that I love to write, as opposed to expecting some kind of perfection from myself, just enjoying the process. So I'm going to write
an arranged marriage between my main character and Hardigan, but she's gonna fall in love with one of his guards, and it's gonna be amazing. And because Hardigan is central to her story, it makes so much more sense for him to die in her book. So we're going to have this arranged marriage plot where she is arranged to marry Hardigan. She's going to fall in love with one of his guards instead. And during the course of that book, she and Eilish, his daughter, will become close and will end up killing him as part of their stories and as part of their growth, as opposed to something that happens in the background of someone else's story. So at the end of their story, Valerian will be injured helping them deal with Hardigan, and he will go off to lick his wounds and end up trapped with Bee at her mill, and they'll have their little moment together. So I'm really excited about that. I'm not loving that I have another book in this proposed series, but like Courtney always says, the back catalog is king. You want to have as much back catalog as you can to get people reading through your work, and I really like the heart of this series. I like the idea of this series, and I'm really excited to see, I'm just really excited to be working on it, especially because I have one of the books finished and I'm quite proud of it. I'm like really proud of my cheesy tentacle porn venom adjacent erotica, and I'm excited to keep moving forward. Okay, so I might have just spent like half an hour watching TikToks instead of doing what I said I was gonna do. Obviously, because TikTok was invented to fuck up my writing schedule, okay? It's not my fault, it's TikTok's fault. So, but now I'm for real. See, I'm off the comfy. I'm for real. Okay, so I think my first book is also going to be a threesome because I want it to be, and we're just chasing joy. So threesome book. Fuck yeah.
So you're probably asking yourself, am I seeing Kayla in a whole new outfit because it's a different day, or because those are her pajamas? So those were my pajamas, but this is another day because, as it turns out, I was not at all finished with editing those stories and figuring out how to make them work more cohesively with the series. One of the things that I struggle with, because one of the things that I do is get attached to a couple, and then even if they don't work in the series, I've like committed to them and I don't want to get rid of them. I like their story, I like the idea, I like the fish out of water who runs into this like hunky magical creature at a like romantic French mill in a summer storm, and they get trapped together and they have these dramatic moment that brings them together and makes them fall desperately in love forever. That's cool and everything, but it just like doesn't fit in the story. There's not really a good way to pull it into the larger overarching narrative, and I have to just cut them loose and let them go. I have kind of like a similar idea for maybe another couple in like a paralleloquel story, but for right now I just have to accept that Bee and Valerian are not my first book because they're not in this series. Valentine does not need a brother. Valerian's character doesn't actually offer much to the rest of the story, and Bee doesn't offer anything at all. So I'm just going to replace their story entirely with Karis and her threesome, which is the arranged marriage story to Hardigan, because that's the story that actually matters. That's the story that leads into the rest of the book. And it does mean that my first book is not a fish out of water, which I'm a little bit concerned about because I'm kind of a firm believer that the first story in a paranormal as a fish out of water is like very good for that, because it introduces your character as a means of introducing your audience, which this won't be, but I'm hoping I can just sort of make it work anyway. There's not really a good way for me to make Karis a like
a normal human, a mortal, or to make her, well, maybe she could be like a lost heir. For the time being, I have to accept that it is more important for Karis's story to really heavily center Hardigan than it is for her to be a fish out of water who is introducing the audience. I'll just have to be more skillful about how I explain my world without info dumping, and I think that's fine. Lots of people manage it, I'll just do it. I was about to say like Cressley Cole's first book in the Immortals After Dark series isn't a fish out of water, but like the very idea that I would compare my own writing to Cressley Cole's is fucking wild. The audacity, truly. So yeah, that's where we are right now. Karis's story is still in process, but I am getting closer and closer to nailing it down, which I'm very grateful for. I really want to start drafting again. I really want to just like try to draft this series as quickly as I can, and then I can go back and do major edits once the whole thing is done, because I've conceptualized it as a whole, and I think that will be, I don't know, maybe easier for me to revise because I find revision so difficult. We'll see how that goes. But for the time being, this video is finished because I figured out how to fix my first book by completely getting rid of it and including something totally different. As always, thank you so much for being here and putting up with me rambling for like 20 minutes. My bad. If you were looking for me pretty much anywhere else, I am basically everywhere as Kayla Amanda. That is Kaylughmanda. And I'll see you next time. I got a Halloween tattoo to show that I am in fact the Queen of Halloween. Take that, Courtney Project. Coming for your fall queen crown.